Long ago in Korea, there lived a poor blind man and his wife. They were content and happy, but longed for a child. For years they prayed for one, until one day the wife suddenly became pregnant. The couple rejoiced, and soon the wife gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. But immediately following the birth, the wife passed away, leaving the poor blind man alone with a daughter to care for. Every day the man had to walk the streets of his village, looking for women who could breastfeed his baby girl. Though initially many wanted to turn the man away because of his ragged and dirty clothes, they were swayed by his sad story and beautiful daughter. The blind man's daughter grew up to be a loving young girl devoted to her father. One day, the blind man was out walking alone to another village, begging for money, when he fell into a ditch. He was unable to get out and was soon afraid that this would be his end, but 3 monks happened to walk by a few hours later and noticed the blind man in the ditch. They offered to not only help the man out of the hole, but to pray to the gods for the man's sight to return. But in return, they requested 300 bags of rice be brought as a tribute to the temple of Buddha. The blind man was so overjoyed that someone had found him that he immediately agreed to the conditions. The monks helped him out, and the man walked home, realizing what he had done. The blind man could not afford more than a bowl of rice a day, much less 300 bags. He told his daughter what had happened, and neither knew what to do. If the blind man failed to follow through with his promise, who knew what would come of his fate? That night, the blind man's daughter's mother came to her in her dreams. She told her daughter to go to the shipyards the following morning, for the emperor's court was there, offering payment in return for a young maiden. It just so happened that the kingdom's sailors had greatly displeased the Dragon King, and were being punished by terrible storms and waves, killing many men and destroying many ships. In return for putting an end to these storms, the Dragon King requested that a young girl be sacrificed to him. The emperor's court went from town to town, offering money to those with young daughters. But no parent could accept such a deal, no matter how much money they were offered. But then one morning, a young girl appeared in the shipyards, saying that she was willing to be sacrificed if 300 bags of rice were given to her father. The court agreed, and the price was paid. The girl was dressed in a wedding hanbok and took off on a ship with a sailor and his crew. They bound her hands and feet, unsure if she would follow through with her decision. But when they were far enough away from land, the young girl said a prayer and threw herself off of the boat. The men on the ship had never seen anything as brave and sad, and all began to weep, and the girl sunk down. Once in the water, the girl found that she had no trouble breathing. She looked around and saw in the distance what was the Dragon King's beautiful palace. Servants from the palace swam up to her, untied her bounds, and brought her inside. There she met the Dragon King. She lived with him for years and was treated well with all the food and clothes she could ever want. But the king noticed how sad she seemed to get when she was alone. One day he inquired, and she told him her story of sacrificing herself to save her father. The Dragon King was moved to tears and decided that she must return to her father. He transformed her into a lotus flower and sent her floating to the surface. There, she washed onto the shore of a beach. The beach was part of a kingdom ruled by the same emperor who had sacrificed her. The emperor was strolling the beaches at dawn in sorrow, for he had just lost his wife. The lotus flower caught his eye, and he found that just looking at the beauty of the flower lifted his spirits. He brought it home and placed it next to his bed. During the nights when the emperor was asleep, the blind man's daughter would transform out of the lotus and go walking around the kingdom, looking for her father. One night, the emperor awoke when the girl was just leaving the room. She tried to transform back into the lotus, but was unable. The emperor was taken with her immediately and asked her to marry him. She said yes, but soon, just like the Dragon King, he noticed how sad the young maiden was. He asked her what he could do to raise her spirits, and she replied that she would like a feast to be held for all the blind men in the kingdom to attend. The emperor agreed to the strange request. The feast lasted for days, and every day the girl would look for her father. On the last day of the feast, she still had not found him and was sitting alone outside of the banquet hall when she heard some commotion in the distance. The emperor's guards were shooing away a man who had come to the feast too late, and who they were sure was just there to beg for money. The girl sprang up, realizing who the man was. She ran to the guards and told them to let the man go, for he was her father. The blind man recognized her voice immediately, and both were overcome with happiness. The blind man said, "Could this be? Is this my daughter? Or is this just a ghost from my past?" They embraced, and when they split apart, the blind man opened his eyes and found he could see again. The two lived together in happiness for the rest of their days, and it is said from then on, any blind man who looked at this girl would regain their sight.